Hello, Piggy.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Bench Movie Club. I'm Lily.
I am Léon. Hello, Mathilda.
Mathilda.
Yeah, and we're gonna, in this episode, we are talking about the 1994 Luc Besson directed Léon. Luc Besson, of course, also made Fifth Element, the Femme Nikita, and Lucy. So the interesting thing about the Femme Nikita is Jean Reno was a cleaner, which is what they call.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this, it's referred to as the assassin, but it's someone to clean up the mess. And his character, Luc Besson, liked his character so much, the character he played in Nikita. This is pretty much a very similar character, except for he's more human in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called Léon, but it's also called The Professional, I think, in the United States.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So that is why it's hard to find sometimes. It's annoying when they change names. Ironically enough, the Femme Nikita was remade into an American film called Point of No Return or Assassin, depending which country you're in. I think it's Assassin, possibly in America. No, it's Point of No Return in America, Assassin over here.
Right.
So that's a bit confusing as well. But yeah, so the film follows Léon, the professional, a hitman, who prides himself on being alone, doing his job well. He doesn't ask for much. Doesn't he's got Tony, who looks after his money for him, who gives him his jobs, and he likes his milk.
And then comes Mathilda.
Oh, and his plant. He likes his plant as well.
Yeah. Well, then comes Mathilda, whose family get killed in the apartment building, basically next to his, by a dirty
DEA agent.
DEA agent. I almost said NDA.
No.
A DEA agent he then saves Mathilda.
Yeah, I thought he was going to say he saves the DEA agent.
No.
So Jean Reno plays Léon. He went on to be in Mission Impossible, Ronin, The Pink Panther. This is the film he'll forever be known as, though, which is no bad thing because it's a great film. He's also got Natalie Portman in her screen debut.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh. Not a bad debut, though, is it?
Oh, no. Should be out thousands of others, though, including Liv Tyler, who was considered, but she was 15 at the time, so she was deemed too old, whereas Natalie Portman was 12, which was more the character's age.
Wait, is the character's age?
Yeah. She went on to be in V for Vendetta, Black Swan, where she won an Oscar.
Yeah.
Didn't she?
I think so. I don't know for certain.
And Closer. The DEA agent, Stansfield, is played by Gary Oldman, who, of course, from Dracula, JFK, Darkest Hour, hundreds of other things. Fantastic actor. Probably, in my opinion, definitely up there as one of the best actors ever, because he's such a chameleon. He can change so much. Funny enough, his character in this is obsessed with Beethoven, and it's the same year a film called Immortal Beloved came out, where he plays Beethoven. And he looks so much like, I remember watching that as well, thinking he looks like Beethoven. Like when you see him in JFK as Lee Harvey Oswald, you think he picks up the mannerisms. It's clearly Gary Oldman, but at the same time you think it looks like Lee Harvey Oswald. Or when he plays Sid Vicious in Sid and Nancy, you think, well, that is
that's
Sid
the
Vicious. Key
of being a good actor.
Yeah,
you have to be able to pick up the mannerisms.
The downfall is it took years for people to sort of cotton on, because it's like sometimes he's unrecognisable in his roles.
Yeah.
Like in Hannibal, okay, there's loads of prosthetics, but you wouldn't know it was him. He's victim in Hannibal, he's all deformed and stuff from like where Hannibal Lecter had attacked him. Well, he drugged him up and got him to carve his own face.
Or
in where he plays Drexel in True Romance, looks completely different.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic actor, and because of that, I think it took a long time for people to appreciate exactly what a good actor he was. So I'm glad he eventually won the Oscar, I think, for The Darkest Hour.
Yeah.
And you've also got Danny Leon, who's in Do the Right Thing, Jacob's Ladder, Hudson Hawk. A small part for Ellen Green from Little Shop of Horrors. Yes, Mr. Mushnick.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, she plays Matilda's stepmom.
Yeah.
But not for very long.
No, of course not.
A few other interesting people. Keith A. Glasgow, who's Benny. You know the character Benny? Who's outside the door. He say, Benny, don't shoot.
Oh, yes.
Big guy. He later went on to become a firefighter. Sadly died September 11th, 2001, rushing into the World Trade Center.
That's sad.
Yeah. You've also got May Wen, who's the blonde girl at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, the stepsister.
She was actually in a relationship with the director, Luc Besson, when she was 15 and he was 32.
Oh.
Yeah. I like this film a lot, but Luc Besson himself, nonsense.
Yeah. But you can see a lot of that attitude that he's obviously got, the nonsensiness in the film.
Yeah, because they played the original cut to an American test audience, and it's the director's cut, which is pretty much the only version you can find now, which I don't like, because it has two scenes in particular, one in a restaurant and one where she's propositioning him, asking him to be her first, and it just sort of, even though like Leon is not interested, you don't need to push the relationship to that level. I think the theatrical version, which is the first version I saw, didn't have them two scenes, and I just felt it makes their relationship a lot purer, and it's more like a father-daughter relationship rather than some, like, he still sees it like that, I think, but she's confused because of loss of parentage and stuff.
Yeah, I just found that really gross in the film. I didn't really appreciate that.
Yeah. Both Mel Gibson and Keanu Reeves both wanted the role of Leon.
See, I can sort of imagine Keanu Reeves playing Leon.
And Mel Gibson. I can see them both doing it, because at the time, that was sort of right up their alley. Yeah. And like Leon, it was about the time that I think Keanu Reeves had done Speed, and I think Mel Gibson was off the back of the Lethal Weapon film, probably Lethal Weapon 3, Maverick, Bird on a Wire. So it's all that type of era. But I don't think it would have been as good. Not saying because they're not as good at acting, or necessarily, but what I like that Jean Reno done, he deliberately played Leon as a bit slow, a bit like more of a childish mentality. He's not like he's stupid or anything, but he makes him more innocent in a way. Yeah. When it comes to relationships, whereas they wouldn't have played it like that. They would have played it more sort of cool and whatever.
I think Jean Reno does a really good job in this film. I didn't dislike the film. I just didn't really appreciate the more gross aspects in the non-theatrical.
But taking them out of it, how did you like the film?
Yeah, I mean, the film made me cry at the end, where obviously when Leon thinks he's managed to escape, but obviously the agent,
Gary
Oldman, shoots him. But
he's
the way
not Asian.
Agent, when he says, "This is for Matilda," he pulls the grenade.
I think that's a fantastic way of ending the film, because I don't think it would have been as memorable if Leon had survived. If Leon had got out, it might have been a happier ending, like they had met up and then sort of run off into the distance, and then the credits roll. You'd go, it was a right film, a bit weird. But what I like, sometimes you've got to have those sort of bittersweet endings, and what was good about it was they had a good goodbye, as when he's bending her down and he tells her how much she meant to him, and so then she goes down the thing and he nearly escapes. Gary Oldman shoots him, you think, oh, you bastard. But it's a great way just to sort of complete his job, because she wants Leon to kill the people who killed her little brother. She doesn't care about the rest of her family who was killed, but her little brother in particular, she found that upsetting.
Yeah.
I love this film. This is a film which I watched it was probably about 95 when I watched it. It would have come out on VHS, and I didn't know too much about it at the time. I was new to sort of Gary Oldman. I knew him from pretty much Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I didn't know I knew him from True Romance, because again at the time I didn't recognise him. But it was after this I was thinking, he's a horrible person in this. but he's such a, you can't help but watch him when he's on the screen. So I think it's a good dynamic between all of them.
Yeah.
Again, going back to like people who could have been Leon, the studio wanted Robert De Niro to do it.
Really?
Which, again, he would have been good, but I'm glad, you got other people a shot at things.
The thing is, nowadays, a lot of the time, people and the studios just tend to recycle the same actors, at least at the moment. Like, every time I see a film...
Chalamet.
Not just Timothy Chalamet. I mean, I'd say
Zendaya.
he's on the lower end of it. I haven't seen Zendaya in much recently either.
The Rock. Everything.
Well, I mean, The Rock just plays himself in films.
Yeah, which I get. You sort of want certain actors. You think you know what you're getting from that person. Again, The Rock is a completely different end of the spectrum to say Gary Oldman. You're not going to find him playing a big range of characters, but you know what you're going to get from him.
None of them are bad actors, obviously. I mean, I'm not in a position to critique their acting abilities. I think.
Well, that's why you're here, in a position to critique their acting abilities.
I'm not critiquing.
But I would. Listen, I actually think Dwayne Johnson's a good actor. He's not fantastic, but he's good enough. He's good enough to warrant some success. The fact that he's the highest paid actor in the world, I think that's more of a reflection on the kind of films that people go and watch in cinema, like big action films, the Fast and Furious films, or Marvel films. And yeah, I just love the beats of the film. Like watching it yesterday, I realised I haven't watched it probably about 15 years. I think I showed it to you when you was really young, and you sort of...
I wasn't 2, 3 when I watched it. I was older than that.
Okay, well maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was still, those are aspects of the film I'd totally forgotten.
Yeah.
I knew about him training her with the rifle on the roof. I forgot about the part where they break into the apartment and he gets her to shoot the bloke with things before he kills them. Very dark humour in it.
Yeah.
But I think it just works so well. It's very simple. Very, not too many characters. It's not bogged down with... There's like 4 significant characters I can think of. Well, I suppose you could say like the dad as well, but... Okay, the main players, you've got 3 characters. So Léon, Stansfield, and Mathilda.
Yeah.
Then there's about half a dozen other ones who sort of play a part. But sometimes, it's very simple storytelling is best.
I mean, when I watched it, because obviously, again, it's been a while since I've watched it, I enjoyed it. I did think it was a good film, but for me, I don't necessarily think I'd watch it again anytime soon. Not because it's a bad film, but just because...
Well, you just watched it.
Yeah, that, and it's just like... It's not one of those films that you really watch. You've just got to appreciate it for what it is and then forget about it, because then I think otherwise, if you oversaturate your watching of it, it's not going to be as memorable.
See, I disagree to an extent, because it was a film, when it first came out, I did watch it multiple times. And in fact, when I was 15, I made a feature film with my home video camera, where I pretty much played all the characters. So I got like half a dozen of my mates to play parts, and it was some spy film. And in that film, I had a bit where I was the police had cornered me, so I was using those clips from Léon, including a bit with Gary Oldman. And he opens this bomb. It's terrible, my film, but it was such a big impact on me, that film.
Yeah.
That I used clips from that and from Blues Brothers with all the cars crashing, the police cars, and it pretty much took up like a good portion of my film.
Well, it was pretty much just that, but then again, that different perspective probably just because of our different film tastes.
Possibly. But see, what I like about this as well is the first, say, 80 or 90% of the film is, it's him doing his assassin work. It's a very good introduction of him showing how professional he is, how competent, how he can take out all this room full of people without breaking a sweat. So that he's someone to be dealt with. Then the rest of the film is him and his relationship with Mathilda, thinking, well, they're never going to be able to take down Gary Oldman because of his position. But then when it gets to that end bit and it's the impossible task, like when Nanny's saying, how's he going to get out of there? It's impossible. Look how many, and you counted them, and the amount of people you think, no, it's the impossible task for him to get out of there, which turns out it is impossible, but he very nearly makes it. And it's such, like where you get action films. I love action films, but I'd rather watch this than the vast majority of action films, because vast majority of action films, they have too much action. It's constantly bah, 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 and all the impossible kind of stuff. This, it feels it's warranted, because even when he's taking down all these cops, you see him getting shot, you see blood coming out of him, you see him getting weaker. It's tiring on him.
Yeah.
You know, it's more realistic in that way. He's clearly a formidable force, but yeah.
I don't know. I, again, didn't dislike the film. Still gave it a high rating on Letterboxd, but I just think that, for me, it's not what I'm looking for when I watch a film.
Mm.
But that's not because I didn't like it. That's just because when I watch a film, I tend to sometimes go for certain types of film. But that's, again, I will watch all films. It just depends.
You're going to watch all films ever?
No, all kinds of film. You know what I meant. After Mathilda's family is murdered, the old woman who steps out of her apartment then tells the murderers to leave the family alone. This is actually the former biology teacher of Woody Allen.
Slimy, bookworm-looking, child-molesting bastard. I don't want to work with that fuck anyway.
She's Jessie Kirsham. That's her name, Jessie Kirsham.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting.
Ish. I don't like Woody Allen.
No, neither. Also, something dreadful happens whenever Mathilda goes to buy milk.
Yeah, it's true. Like the first, like when she goes down to get buying milk, and her family will get killed, and then at the end where she goes to get milk, and then she ends up getting caught by the old Bill. Ugh, there's something in this. Little black thing.
Oof. Mathilda wants Norman Stansfield dead in order to avenge the death of her brother, which was the only member of the family that she cared about. Although Stansfield kills the rest of Mathilda's family, her brother is actually killed by Stansfield henchman Willie. You can hear Malky scolding him for it when Mathilda walks by the entrance to the apartment right after the raid. This means that she is actually present to witness the death of her brother's killer, as she is in the room when Léon shoots him.
Yeah, because when she's caught in the police station, isn't it? That Willie's going about eating the pizza. But no, there's no anchovies with that. Léon comes in and shoots him. So yeah, I mean, but if she put to, I think she knew though in her heart, even though he didn't pull the trigger, the reason her brother's dead is because of Stansfield, because he's the one calling the shots. He comes in there, goes, right, you got till midday, which is a great way. I like. He's so intimidating in it, and Harry sort of has that little deadline where he's got to go in there. You know, they was actually going to make a sequel to this, where Luc Besson, he wanted Natalie Portman to be a bit older by that point. So it was going to be like she is now a female assassin, which obviously he'd done previously with the film Nikita. But he left Gaumont Film Company to start his own company, Europa Corp. And because they were unhappy that he'd left them, they decided not to, that he couldn't use the character, because even though he created the character, he no longer owned the rights.
That's a shame.
Yeah, you've got to, if it's things like that, you should really try your best to keep hold of the rights to your products. It's sometimes easier said than done. It's like I've written a whole bunch of scripts, and if a studio came up to me and said, yeah, we'll give you X amount to make your film, but we own it. I go, yeah, okay, that's fine. And this is an early film of his, so yeah.
Mathilda checks herself and Léon in under the name MacGuffin. MacGuffin is a movie term coined by Alfred Hitchcock for a device that interests the film's characters, especially the antagonists, and thus drives the plot forward. Its actual nature is not really the subject of the film and does not really matter to the audience. Other directors such as George Lucas invest more meaning in the nature of the MacGuffin.
So you said the film made you cry. Why did you cry?
I just, when Natalie Portman, she's obviously wanting Léon to get back to her. She's all alone again. She has to go live in the orphanage.
It's the hard knock life for us.
Or the girls' school. She's all alone. I mean, I get that she has Léon to plant, but realistically, it's not person. She doesn't really have anyone anymore.
No.
So it just kind of sets up this idea that she's just going to be quite lonely for the rest of her life. I mean, other than maybe Tony, but that's not really anything personal.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. I like the poetic ending of her planting the plant. I mean, yeah, realistically, it's a house plant and wouldn't survive the winter, but it's still nice that, you know, it's a nice way to end the film. Like the whole point of it, where she's saying if you love the plant, you should plant it and let it grow roots and stuff like that. You know, like he was going to, he's planting roots. He's sort of got a family now, as in her. You know.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was upsetting because I found it. I've watched it hundreds of times before, and I don't know if just where I'm older now and I look differently at things. But yeah, seeing when he pulls the mask off and he's walking to the door, like at the end, and you see it on his face, it's almost like, yeah, I made it. I can't believe I got out of it. And he's all happy because he's obviously thinking, that's it, I got through, and Mathilda's going to be there and everything. And it's great the way they shoot it because you see Gary Oldman's gun behind him, and rather than see the gunshot, him get shot, see from his POV, and it's just like
a slight hit of exposure.
Yeah, it's like the light sort of flash, and then the camera goes down, and you don't hear a gunshot, but you think you do because of the music. As the music's playing, it's sort of timed perfectly in time with that. So, I mean, for me, I've seen quite a few Luc Besson films. For me, this is miles better than anything else he ever made. I know your mum was a big fan of Fifth Element, which is another great Gary Oldman performance in that. He adopts like a southern drawl. But for me, this was perfection from him. And it gave, for me, for years afterwards, if I see something that had Luc Besson attached, I was optimistic. And it's eventually I was thinking, oh, he won't never
be Léon.
No. Which again is ironic because this was just a filler for him because he was waiting to get money to make Fifth Element. This was like he wrote this in like a couple of weeks.
Well, that's like a lot of directors. Sometimes the stuff that they put together quickly, or there's less motivation behind the film. They tend to be more popular to an extent. I mean, it's not from my perspective, but from your perspective, the Damien Chazelle's Whiplash, you obviously ranked that a lot higher than La La Land, despite the fact that Whiplash was basically what he used so that he could create La La Land because he'd been creating that for 10 years at that point. But no, I just generally speaking, yeah, a lot of directors will make films that they're not actually as happy with, and then they end up having higher status amongst other films.
I also think there's a lot to be said about reducing the amount of freedom a director has. I think a good producer is important because it's like with Tarantino, personally, I think his earliest stuff is his best because at that point you had to be reliant on a limited budget. You had to adhere to whatever the producers and studios had to say. If they came and said, well, we don't like this scene, you have to change this. And he had to. But then after Pulp Fiction, and he really solidified his name, he then had more creative freedom. And with that, sometimes you get things like, for example, off the top of my head, Django Unchained. That goes on for like a good half hour more than it has to.
Yeah.
It could have ended with the initial shootout, but then Tarantino stuck himself in it as like some Australian slave trader or something. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But like this, and like with Whiplash, what makes him so good is because they're so stripped down.
I think if you're given more of sometimes it's actually better to have less freedom over your choices when you're creative, which is a weird thing to say because a lot of creatives would disagree with that. It's better to be able to have control over your product, but sometimes actually feedback and other people's input is what can make a really good product.
Yeah.
So
this is it. Once you get really big, and then also like I can't remember his name, but the director of Donnie Darko, he then followed that up with Southland Tales, I believe, with like Justin Timberlake and Sean William Scott, and it was obviously a huge budget, much bigger, and it becomes such an ego project that he thought, I can make a really long, big epic film, and he was too ambitious. And it basically ended his career because people were so happy with Donnie Darko. And I think you need to have discipline as a filmmaker. Your first film is always going to be like Reservoir Dogs with Tarantino's stripped back, just very simple story, characters, and just continue along that trend for it's built slowly. Some people just run before they can walk, and it's often their downfall. All the interiors of Léon's apartment were actually shot in Paris, France.
yeah, I can see that actually.
But the corridor shots were shot earlier in New York, so immediately outside his door. Yeah.
It's very French-esque, I can tell with the apartment.
I always found that a bit off-putting that he's supposed to be Italian.
Yeah, he seems just French.
Well, this is it. He's obviously, I mean, I think he was actually born in Morocco, but he grew up in France and he has a French accent. So when they're going, oh, especially when it's so important to a part where they're going, well, they said an Italian hitman came in, and I'm thinking, well,
Is it just because he's under Tony, who's an Italian?
possibly. Well, but they, maybe it's a certain style, or maybe it's because there wouldn't be any French hitmen, so they do the process of elimination. It's nothing to do with the Yakuza, triads, Yardis, any other sort of group. And based on his ethnicity, he's more closely resembled to an Italian.
Yeah.
But obviously, as soon as he opens his mouth, "Hello, I'm Léon," it's like, he sounds so French. It's like stereotypical French in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a small gripe for me. For me, this is one of my favourite films from the 90s.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair enough. I get why.
Absolute favourite. It's one of my favourites.
No, but there's.
I'd say it's definitely in my top 20 90s films, which sounds like a big scope, but there are loads of good 90s films. But this, at that era, that mid-90s sort of cool, trendy, new thing, again, very closely attached to like the Tarantino-esque type films. You had all these indie films coming out, and all these things which aren't going for the mainstream sort of, let's stick a big name in the middle and let's make it like a big budget, and we have like the usual sort of steps in the story. A little bit about Luc Besson. In 1977, when he was 18, he was actually rejected by the National Film School of France, because in his preliminary interview, he was asked which directors he most admired. He said Spielberg, Scorsese, and Milos Forman, and the interviewer cut him off saying, that's enough, I don't think you belong here.
Really?
And I think that's just indicative of that kind of snobby attitude you get with certain university students in particular. Like you get so-called movie critics or like these film students who will go like, they will list off a bunch of, you're thinking of that little thing, that little sketch.
My favorite movie is Sonic 3.
Is that Liam?
That's Liam.
My favorite movie is Jaws.
I like the movie with the big shark because it's got the big teeth.
Jaws is like, people say it's a great movie.
It's just such like it's such a NPC pick.
A lot of people like Jaws. Oh my god, Will.
Oh, fuck. I like the fish and the movie.
Yeah. Well, just also the people. I mean, I do film studies.
Yeah, so, and you get people who go like, oh, it's obviously Kurosawa and Bergman. And if someone says, oh, I like Spielberg, I like Steven Spielberg's films, they go, oh, really? Oh, mainstream much? And you think, yeah, but it's the reason he was mainstream because he was fantastic, and some of the work that he done is phenomenal. And it really, the reason he was successful is because it just appealed to such a wide range of people. But he didn't patronise his audience, especially early Spielberg. He did. You think Jaws was, for all intents and purposes, a family film, and yet it is genuinely terrifying in moments. Obviously, once you've overexposed to it, you're not scared anymore. But when you watch Jaws for the first time, you think, this is scary. Despite the rubber shark, the way he directs that film is phenomenal. He's regarded as one of the greatest directors for a reason. And I don't subscribe to these people who's just, they want to be more elitist. They want to pick the film that no one's heard of, or very few people have heard of.
It's better to be, if you isolate an audience, it's that you're bound to get less people reacting to it, which is sometimes important in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but I just think you need to be true to yourself, and you need to sort of unashamedly say, you know what, I love Jurassic Park. The first Jurassic Park, fantastic. I remember seeing that about 2-3 times in the cinema. Granted, I was a child. But when you watch it now, the reason the Jurassic Park sequels don't work is because the first one is set in this world where dinosaurs don't exist. So for you to then see the dinosaurs and how Spielberg plods along and shows you at the right times the right amount of dinosaur, not too much. There's big scenes in it where you go, well, where are they? And you think the audience share the sentiment. So then when you finally get them, and you get that scene with the T-Rex ripping down the cage, and how it's played with like for so long with no music, it's just so intense. And you think, well, he's going to kill the kids. Everyone stays still, and Alan Grant say, "Don't move." And what's clever about that is because Spielberg knew the audience won't move. He's not just talking to Jeff Goldblum when he says, "Don't move." Their vision's based on movement. Just stay still. People in the cinema, everyone just sat there,
Yeah,
held their breath.
if you don't see something, it's more scary.
Yeah.
The more you see it, the more you get used to it.
But I mean, it still holds up to now. But the sequels after that, it then goes into the franchise area. But that film on its own, if it had just been a single film, I think it would be held in a higher regard. So I'm going off on tangent here. But yeah, I actually agree with him on that. Spielberg, Scorsese, Milos Forman, all fantastic directors. Why wouldn't they be amongst your favourite?
The original script had a much darker ending. After Norman Stansfield shoots Léon, Mathilda performs the grenade ring trick seen in one of the restored scenes of Version Integral, and opens her jacket to reveal the live grenades. It was changed by Luc Besson, featuring that the audience would not accept Mathilda's transformation from an innocent girl to a crazed juvenile killer. Besson had never intended such a transformation for the character.
No, but that wouldn't have worked as well, the ending. I like the hope that, she, through his efforts, she has now got some sort of normality. Her life is better at the end than it was at the beginning, minus her little brother. That's the one thing she'd probably trade it all for, just to get him back. But despite that, she is now in this school, which, without the distraction of her parents and with the teachings from Léon, she can now grow there. She's a more rounded person,
Yeah. According to Mathilda, the events of this movie occur over the space of 4 weeks, which means that Léon learned to read and write in the space of a month, which is an impressive feat in itself. And the police officer states in the beginning that it's July, so the events of this movie take place in July and August in New York, making it unlikely that Léon will need to wear his wool cap in order to not catch a cold.
Yeah, I also think that that's part of his sort of being incognito. He doesn't want to be recognisable, and something as simple as wearing a hat would hide his hair. His hair, which would be distinctive. Someone could say he's got a widow's peak, he's got short hair, he's whatever, he's black hair. Whereas with a hat, they could say, well, he's wearing a hat, and they go, well, those people wear hats. Yeah. We won't be able to get him on that. So I can forgive that. I know what they say because we've both been in New York in the summer.
Yeah.
In August.
Horrible.
And we had to run from shade to shade through Central Park because it was so intense, the heat.
Not as bad as Japan. Japan's heat was much worse.
God. Yeah, Japan, when we was in Disney, again, we had to just run for the shadows. I can't understand how people can live in countries like this. I love Japan, but I mean, that was the kind of thing that would put me off living there. With the summer was so intense. This is what we're so lucky about this country. You get a hot summer, but it's never to that degree. It's never to the degree that you go, oh, quick, get out the sun. You've literally got to run and hide somewhere, and you get a cold winter, but never so much that the streets like 6 feet of snow and you can't get through it.
Interesting fact again, going off of what you were saying earlier about Gary Oldman playing Beethoven, the scene in which Norman Stansfield, played by Gary Oldman, talks about his appreciation for Beethoven was actually completely improvised. The scene was filmed several times, which Oldman gave a different improvised story on each take. So it just so happens to be that in the version that, the screened version is the
That's the version, yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, maybe they did it just because obviously where they knew he was going to be in that film.
No, I think part of that is coincidental because I think there's like Nanny observed, she said whenever there's got a character listening to classical music, they're either insane or they're a genius, or both.
Yeah.
They'll often use certain tropes in films to indicate a certain aspect of a character. They'll have classical music, like you said. Someone's sitting there listening to classical music. You think there's something about that person. They're not about to get up because it's meant to show you some sort of different.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some people who listen to classical music aren't necessarily intelligent people. You can just enjoy the music. But
I mean, for film purposes, that's just something they'll show to portray a certain. It's like the Apple thing. Whenever there's often if someone's an arsehole in a film, they'll be eating an apple. it's such a simple thing, but someone eating an apple rather than eating like a chocolate bar or smoking or doing something which is more relatable to some people. You think he's eating an apple means he's very conscious of something. And often they'll be doing it while they're sort of gloating over someone. Yeah, right, well, I'm eating this apple. I don't even care about trying to be cool. I eat fruit. It's weird. You'll notice it a lot more in films now. I've mentioned it, but yeah. Right, so this film on IMDb has got 8.5.
It's excellent.
I think it's fully deserved. That's what I'd give it. Easily, I'd give it 8.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
I'd definitely, I think it's spot on for me because 8 is a great score, but it's more than 8 for me. 9 is pushing it a little bit only because of the amount of films out there. I'd say it probably makes my top 50 movies of all time, I reckon.
Really?
Definitely my top 100, but possibly, my top 50. I'll have to write it down one day. Rotten Tomatoes, it got 75% by the critics and 95% by the audience.
It's quite a disparity between the two.
Yeah, and I think that's largely...
people have different opinions, and I think depending on how critical you are as a person, you're going to be looking at it from different aspects. So obviously someone who's like a film critic will rate it differently to just a general audience member.
I also think it depends upon what version you watch. Because as I said, I much prefer the theatrical version, even though the theatrical version is literally the director's cut minus mainly those two scenes. For me, the pacing's a lot better, and as I said, it's not as sordid and it's more pure, and it hits home a lot more with the tragic ending. I think those scores are reflective of depending what people watch, because I can understand why the American test audience went, no, we don't like those aspects of it. Great film, but we don't like that and that.
Yeah.
And that's when they changed it. But Luc Besson, being the old nonce that he is, decided, no, it's normal. He's trying to normalise those kind of relationships.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah. There was, because even though it's that May Wen, who believed that it was based on her relationship with Luc Besson, that wasn't the precedent for necessarily what his relationship was, because he also, there was another girl who I think when he was 30 and she was 12, he met her. I don't think anything had happened to him at that point, but he did marry that girl, I think, when she was 16.
Oh, it's so gross.
Yeah.
So, see, for me, that kind of sullies my image of the film. That's the thing. When it's stuff like that, I can't respect a film as much sometimes.
But this is the problem: is you really need to separate the art from the people who make it. Because, for example, Chinatown. I love Chinatown, great film, but it's directed by Roman Polanski.
Yeah.
And
it just often, for me at least, if someone does something so abhorrent, it will sully a film for me.
Well, this is the other problem. It's like with all the recent stuff, say like the P. Diddy stuff and Jeffrey Epstein and all the people who it's rumoured to be associated with that. If and when all the stuff comes out and it's this person's guilty, this person's guilty, this person's guilty, you're going to find the vast majority of Hollywood films would be ruined forever for you, because you'll be thinking, it's like Ben every other week goes, oh, I can't stand Tom Hanks, because he's heard an unfounded rumour.
Yeah.
Which could be true or not, and it may come out, but I said to him, you can't let that affect you. It's the same with music. There are so many musical artists who are fantastic, but if you look at their life and the things they've done to, not just to young people, but to other people in general, and you think, that's horrible. Like, whether it's like John Lennon beating his wife or something like that, or the Rolling Stones sleeping with underage girls.
Yeah, it's just, you can't.
You as soon as you go down that rabbit hole, it's and also, again, if you start making this moral stance saying, I can't like this film because that director is a nonce, you think, okay, well then you can't like this film, this film, this film, this song, none of this song, and you can even go back further to like artists.
Yeah.
People, if you look up all the great artists of all time and you look at some of the stuff that they done, you think, that's disgusting. Some of the great leaders, some of the great philosophers, some of the great authors, if you went through every single author and you think, let's look up the top if you look up the top, say, 10 authors of all time, whatever's on a general
Oh
list,
yeah.
and you looked up their lives, you'd think, what a horrible person that person was. It's great that we live in an age where we hold ourselves to a higher standard, but you've also got to think so much of this was left unchecked for so long. So many people were able to sort of get away with this. And that thing about him, the Luc Besson and the young girls, that's normalised in France. You've got to think he comes from France. It's somewhere where it's the same as in Japan. The age of consent is like 13.
It's just, I don't know.
We can't get our heads around that. It's the same as like, we don't like eating cats and dogs, but in China, they would eat cats and dogs. And it'd be normalised for them. Or when I showed Ben Oldboy, which I love Oldboy, the Korean one, and he hated it because of the octopus scene. He said, that poor octopus. They're so intelligent. And he got really angry about it. And they've killed these octopuses, especially for this film. I said, but we don't understand it. That's normal in Korea. They will serve you a live octopus and cut it up in front of you while it's alive and feed you to it. I'm not saying
Feed
it to you. It's not nice. But again, if you start, you've got to learn to appreciate art without getting, you're not supporting the person involved, the people involved. I'm a huge fan of Kevin Spacey, and I hated all the stuff, the child. I'm glad he got found innocent, but I think even if he wasn't found innocent, I would still love Seven. I still love Usual Suspects. I would still love LA Confidential.
You just wouldn't like him as an actor.
Well, I wouldn't like him as a person. I'd still like him as an actor because I think he's a fantastic actor.
Oh yeah.
American Beauty as well. And Swimming with Sharks. I remember seeing Swimming with Sharks with him for the first time, and I thought, what a fantastic actor. I want to see more of this guy. And I was hoping that he'd be found innocent, but even if he wasn't, I still would have watched those films and gone, you know what? I don't like him as a person, but he's a bloody great actor.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was Léon.
Mathilda.
So next week, there's a very close connection with this one. As I said, Jean Reno, who plays Léon, as I said, this was sort of loosely based on his character from La Femme Nikita, also directed by Luc Besson. Now, about the same time as Léon, I think it was the same year. Well, it might have been the year before. Hollywood remade The Femme Nikita as Point of No Return / Assassin, as I mentioned earlier, that film. And that is what we're going to do next week. Ben loves Assassin. And so from one 90s hitman to another.
Fair enough.
I haven't actually seen Assassin, so it'd be interesting for me to see it for the first time properly.
Yeah.
I remember he used to love it. He used to watch it. It's got Bridget Fonda in it, and I think Harvey Keitel. But yeah. So thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching.
And au revoir. If he was French, no, it was Italian. Arrivederci. See, I could do better Italian than Léon.
Could you?
See.
Bye, everyone.